The event happened in a small town near the city of Kozan in the 1980s. A man named Viktor Kuznetsov was dedicated to the care of his sheep and farming. Since his teenage years, he was dedicated to this. During the summer, he worked in his fields, and in the winter, with the help of his wife, he made clothes for the cold season. Likewise, he had much mastery over his farm animals. In fact, his own sheep obeyed him and seemed to be very fond of him. A couple lived very well, but something was missing. Yes, it wasn't all rosy, you see. Alfred met his wife in his youth. They married with much love and soon tried to have children. But unfortunately, that longed-for firstborn was not forthcoming. A year, 2 years passed, and they couldn't experience parenthood. So they went to a local doctor to find out what the exact problem might be. Let's remember that in those days there was no modern equipment that we have today to help a woman get pregnant. And even if they had, the couple didn't have the financial means to pay the expenses. Simply put, the doctor gave the woman a test and soon got the result. The doctor told him, "Victor, your wife cannot have children. I'm very sorry, and there's nothing I can do. I'm truly sorry." He stared at his wife, but before thinking of him alone, he helped his wife to get out of that sorrow that marked her. Remembering that she would not be able to have children, she told him, "You'd better separate from me, Alfred. You have a right to your happiness." The man with tears in his eyes replied, "No, woman, you are my happiness. God knows why he does things." And from then on, they both lived with a broken dream. Maybe that's why the man got along well with the animals, tried to calm his soul and order his thoughts. Everything went on as usual. Alfred sheared all his sheep during the late spring and prepared the wool for sale or kept it to make coats in the winter with his wife. He also took care of the baby lambs to be sold later. In the summer, he planted corn and beans and took them to a market in the city to sell, so he had no time to feel sad. He had to work if he wanted to have a life without worries. At 30 years of age, something important happened. It was the coldest winter season in the last decade. It was July 1988. All the windows of the house were closed. The heating had to be on all the time at the expense of wood and fire, and the family dog, who loved to spend the night in the yard, now hidden. His house at night lay down by the stove and went to sleep peacefully. In the morning, the farmer woke up as usual, and over breakfast at the table, he and his wife were talking about what they had to do during the day. And when she started to get ready to sell some home-baked goods, the farmer went to feed his animals. A lot of snow had fallen that night, and by morning it was finally clear. The farmer went out into the yard and felt that something was wrong. The door to his animal's pen was open. He panicked. He thought his sheep had escaped. But no, they were all in their place. The man sighed in relief through the hay and watched as the sheep ran happily to eat. And it was just at that moment that his smile changed. One sheep was missing. In fact, she was the one that was always attached to him and always ran when Victor approached. Besides, she was different from the rest. Of all his flock, she was the smallest and the only one that lived. The farmer had never experienced anything like this. It was the first time one of his animals had escaped. But how? He wondered if she couldn't even run properly because of her small disability. So he went out to look for her, searched every corner of his yard, but nothing. So we went out on the same trail where Victor used to take his sheep to eat grass on the mountain. He walked through the territory and finally noticed his beloved sheep lying in the distance. It was a little difficult to spot her. She was very white and was not much contrast with the snow. She was lying about half a mile from the house. But how did she get here? And why was she the only one that got out? The farmer ran over to look. Did she freeze? He ran to her, squatted down, and began to remove the snow with his bare hands. But his beloved sheep would not get up. And only when he had removed all the snow from her, he became perplexed. Finally, he understood why she wouldn't stand up. And that is she's hiding under her body 3 babies and a baby hook with them. It was obvious the sheep had warmed the 3 babies at that time. The farmer immediately took the child with his cold hands when he felt the little babies woke up. Surprisingly, the baby's skin was very warm. It was as if he had not spent the night under the intense cold -20 degrees. The farmer couldn't believe what he was witnessing and couldn't get over his amazement. So he took them home, and on the way he asked himself, how did this all happen? His wife at the time was making dough for cakes. The man opened the door in desperation and entered the house with a child in his arms. The The wife looked on in astonishment. What about the 3 babies? The farmer tried to explain what happened, but his wife asked him to calm down. And together they began to examine the 3 children, which was actually a little girl and 2 boys. They were triplets and almost 2 years old and appeared to be completely healthy. They both didn't know what to do. It was the first time that 3 babies were in his home. However, some were already in the kitchen being prepared. After a few minutes, she put them on a plate and fed them to babies bit by bit. The little girl ate eagerly, and their brother too. The woman then said, "But how did you get here?" 3 babies sat still on the bed. "What are their names?" the farmer asked. The babies looked at him and kept silent. The man repeated the question, but again did not get an answer. "Victor, it's babies. They may not even know how to talk," commented his wife. The man nodded. However, since he didn't get an answer, he himself decided to check where they could have come from. He told his wife that he would walk around the nearby houses. So Alfred went out to investigate. The appearance of the babies was a very strange phenomenon. To begin with, the couple lived in a distant place where there were only a few houses where most older people lived. The man went out and asked the neighbors, but nobody knew anything. Having no one else to ask, he decided to examine the place where he found the babies. He went back there, and somehow the same sheep that took care of the child ran to him, and this hook played with her. "It's amazing that you made it through the night without shelter and didn't freeze." "You're so strong," Victor told her. No doubt it was a miracle. The man thought if he could, he would find any footprints or traces, but nothing. Everything was covered in grass and crops. However, the man, for some reason, decided to dig right under where he found the babies. He didn't really expect anything, but soon he felt something in his hands. There was a paper note. He opened it and there were some words. However, the man couldn't read and couldn't understand what it said. So he went back home. At that moment, the little girl was playing with the family dog and her brothers were sleeping. She looked very happy. The man showed the note to his wife. The woman who could read opened it and read, "Forgive me, but I can't have you with me." Everything was beginning to take shape. No doubt they intentionally left the children behind. The woman said, how could they leave such a fragile little girl and 2 boys in the middle of nowhere in the bitter cold? And a piece of paper with a simple apology on it. The man was furious. He went out again, went through the fields, the neighboring houses, but no one. There was no suspicious person. Then he returned to his home, and when he opened the door at that moment, the wife had the babies in her arms. When the farmer saw her, the tears came back to his eyes. He saw what he dreamed almost all his life, a complete family with a girl and 2 boys and a wife. Eventually, the baby fell asleep, and the couple had a conversation to decide what to do with her. Although there was nothing special to discuss, they decided it was better to keep her at home and let it be what God wills. So the couple with the youngest children, whom they named Anna, Anton, and Arnold, they raised them as their own children and worked harder to make sure that they lacked nothing. Anna began to grow up and didn't know how her parents had found her, and her brothers. They didn't tell her anything either. She herself quickly began to call them Mom and Dad. The farmer and his wife were happy. The little girl also made friends with the sheep, and they took care of them and saved them, although they didn't remember that unfortunate night. And each time the memory of their childhood was fading. And so several more years passed, and the time came when the sheep grew old. The whole family was worried about the favorite sheep, but the time came when she died. Anna and Anton and Arnold were very sad about her departure, and when that happened, she ran out of the house and sat down by a tree which was on the road. An old woman passing by noticed the tears in the girl's eyes and asked her, "Did they already tell you that you were adopted? Don't be sad. The important thing is that your loved." Anna, confused, began to ask the old woman what she meant. The older woman realized that she'd made a mistake and left. The girl ran home and asked her parents if it was true what the old woman had told her. Then the man opened the box and took out a piece of paper, and then showed it to his daughter and her brothers too. When they read it, they couldn't help the tears. The man told how it really happened, how Anna came to them. The girl and her brothers said that they needed to think. The family spent a tense night already. In the morning, when the father and his wife woke up, they heard the bedroom door ringing. It was Anna and Anton approaching them and simply said, "You are my only parents and we don't need more than that." Years later, that little girl became a teacher and her 2 brothers, farmers. They lived happily and the hard part was past.